Welcome back. We are back in public session, and I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Making sure you know me, right? What's my name again? Okay, next up is our consent agenda. We've got meeting minutes, we've got payroll warrant, expense warrant, budget transfers, and...
The acknowledgement is actually February 27th.
Oh, that's it, yes, thank you. And there's acknowledgement of review of executive session minutes, and it should say dated February 27th, 2023, not March 13th, 2023. That's what we reviewed. And we have a field trip. It's a recent field trip, so we have to approve that.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
One question on the out-of-state field trip. Typically, when out-of-state field trips occur, we have a staff member who's in the position of lodging and supervising students outside of the event. In this situation, it seems like parents will be traveling with students and arranging lodging. So I just wanted to clarify that that's different, and presumably that means parents have responsibility for students outside of the event. I don't know if that's been clarified or...
I don't know if we can speak to that.
Yeah, so the idea being is that when you're saying parents are having responsibility outside the event, what do you?
Well, I think there's a track and field event,
Yeah.
but then there is all the time outside of the event.
Right.
And usually when students are traveling with staff members, staff have supervisory responsibilities 24/7. In this situation, it seems like students are traveling with parents, and I just didn't want that to be ambiguous. I don't think it's not an objection. I think it's more of an advisory request, just to make sure that our staff and administration clarify with the parents so that there's no question about where the lines are in terms of supervision of students, just in terms of safety and supervision.
Yep.
That's all, just because this does seem a little different
Yep.
than what we normally do, which is totally fine, and congratulations to the team, and good luck, and it sounds really exciting, so just
Yeah.
thought that should just be clarified since it's different.
It is different, and it's a scenario where they're traveling with their family because it's just this small group of them
Right.
as well too, and so it's
Right.
more like they're going to be representing Westford outside of the state, which therefore what makes this sort of something. But you're right, they're really going with their families,
Right.
and they'll be under their family supervision the whole time. But you are approving their ability to represent outside of the state overnight is really kind of, maybe, is that more?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
I think just the
that's
fact
more-
that you've raised it and noted it is
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
And it's
Right.
a good reminder to look, just to remember that for future field trips, and just sort of note that when we see it.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, just because it's different than our normal practice.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Okay, so approved. Public comment. We always welcome public comment at our meetings, either in person or virtually on Zoom. I'm going to look on Zoom. If anyone on Zoom wishes to make public comment, you can raise your hand and we can pull you in. Otherwise, I'm not seeing anybody clamoring to the microphone in the room. And so I think, and I'm only seeing one person on Zoom, and I don't think she's here for public comment, but we're sure glad she's here anyway. And I think we can move on to our informational updates. We'll start with superintendent update.
My first update is actually just reminding all of you that this is Nina's last meeting with us in her official capacity. Now, I'm sure she's going to come as a resident and visit, and she might come and want to make public comments.
She has
There's a
threatened-
lot
she
of
has
things.
threatened that,
There's
so
a lot of
I'm
things
looking forward to it.
she might want to do, but it is officially her last evening as in this capacity. Sitting next to her is Kathy Mucci, who is going to be taking her position, who has started today as well too. But I just wanted to remind everybody that it is her last meeting, and I didn't know if there was something that you wanted to say.
We sure do. First, we have a little something from the school committee, just to show you our appreciation, not just for this committee, but I can't even imagine how many committee members you have worked with over the years. And so, for people who don't know, Nina, I don't know that there's anybody who knows more about the ins and outs of how this, how this building runs and the district runs than Nina. And so, and you've always been such a great asset to the committee. So speaking on behalf of this group, we sure appreciate it, and we'll miss you. And like I said, hope to see you around in other ways in the future. At Market Basket. Yep.
Thank you very much. That's so kind of you. And as I've said to so many people, it's when you enjoy your job, it's hard to leave no matter what. It's time for me. I'm excited about it, but it's hard to leave. And working with, you're all such a great group of people to work with. I have to say, I won't miss you on Monday night.
Wait, what?
I will miss you because you're all so generous and kind, supportive, and it's a pleasure working with all of you. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Nina.
Thank you.
And we're excited for you
Yeah.
as well.
I like to joke that Nina makes us look good.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
that's not a joke.
No.
That I would like to
Sincere.
think in any way that my transition into this role has been successful, I credit Nina
Yeah.
for being able to be there to support me and to help, bring in new administration. And so, we've talked about it quite a bit, even just over the year and a half, and I'm very sad to see her leave. However, I'm very happy that she's able to retire. So it's that envious
Yeah.
position, but you absolutely make people look good. So,
And she's you could almost, the role of like the school committee historian, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
very, very, very much appreciated
Yeah.
and valued.
Thank you for your kind words.
thank you, Nina.
And welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
We're-
I'm leaving
Mine want
in
you to come.
terrific hands, as Chris knows, but
Yep.
I feel really great about Kathy joining central office, joining school committee. It's a wonderful addition for central office.
Fantastic. Thanks.
And then the other, I was going to share that I did go to the MIA regional training for addressing hate in sports. I went with Principal Antonelli and Athletic Director Mr. Bunyan. I would say honestly the best takeaway, it was a 2-day event, Friday and Saturday. The best takeaway was really us being able to connect with other districts that we don't normally interact with, and to kind of hear the different issues and stories and thoughts that other people had as well was very effective, and so I was grateful for that. I was also very glad that Principal Antonelli and Mr. Bunyan were able to talk quite a bit and share with other communities just what they've been doing with the DCL in the last year and a half, which I think has been really effective, and other schools were really glad to hear that, and were really interested to hear what they've been doing with the captains and with the teams, and in different proactive work, which I think was great. And then Friday was a wonderful day of wackiness, where some of us saw Willy Wonka kids at Abbott, and then my Friday ended with the crazy talent show at SBTA that they sponsored at Stony Brook. And the highlight to both of those things is how the students run those events. Absolutely, the directors do an incredible job creating an environment for the students to thrive, for them to learn the skills. But when it comes to production week and showtime, the adults truly step back and the students run the whole thing. And it's awesome to see that from 5th grade through 8th grade, knowing that that's the same experience at the academy as well too. It's just great. So I just want to congratulate all of those students and the directors that worked with them. And then we all made it through annual town meeting on Saturday
With an approved budget
with an approved budget.
and approved capital projects. And
That's right.
Yep.
So that was good. Did you have?
Yes, last week on Wednesday and Thursday, the advisory committee for the search for the Nabnasset principal
met and conducted the first round of interviews. We have moved forward three semifinalists to the next stage of the process. The three semifinalists will meet with Dr. Chu in the central office cabinet tomorrow. And shortly after that, communication will be going out to staff as well as families to announce the April 3rd, which is a meet and greet for the finalists that are selected to move forward. We'll have the staff meet and greet on Monday the 3rd from 3:30 to 5:15, and then the parent or guardian meet and greet will be that evening from 6 o'clock to 7:45. So the names are not public yet, but those will be coming soon.
Carrie, are the meet and greets in person or
Yes.
hybrid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it at Nabnasset.
They're at Nabnasset School, yes, in the cafeteria.
Okay, great.
And we're still going to do the same survey feedback?
Yes, so the staff who attend the meeting in the afternoon and parents or guardians in the evening, there is written feedback. There's a template, a form that they can either do electronically or hard copy, where they will submit their take on the three interviews, if there are three that end up continuing to make it to that stage. And that's additional information that the superintendent will use to make his decision, which will come very shortly after the 3rd. After our interviews tomorrow, we'll be able to start the reference checks, so that will happen throughout this week prior to the meet and greet sessions.
Can I ask, Carrie, just in general, because I just think it's interesting to see, did you have many applicants for the role, and, you know, comparative to even last year with, I suppose, Miller being a K-2 as well? I just think it's kind of interesting to see that kind of data or information.
Sure, yeah, we did have, there has been an uptick in applicants, so we kind of see that things are starting to even out a little bit more. We brought 6 individuals in for the initial screening,
Awesome.
interview screening. Yes, so we have 3 very qualified people going forward.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's nice to see.
Thank you for leading a really
Yeah.
thorough, intentional process on that.
Yeah.
I think it worked really well last year with our searches, and so I look forward to hearing what happens, and look forward to next Monday night,
Monday,
April
yes,
3rd.
3rd.
Great.
Thank you.
School committee updates. I guess I'll kick it off with a reminder that we have a joint session with Select Board tomorrow night. I say it like, I'm like, we have, sorry, 2 nights in a row. It's on their agenda for 7:05. We're doing this in order to appoint the Westford representatives to the Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee, which is something we do with the Select Board jointly, with the town moderator overseeing that process. And so it'll be 7:05. It's a hybrid meeting, so I think we could say that you could do it, you know, if you need to join virtually, that should be okay, you know. I'm going to try to be in person, but we should be able to accommodate virtual attendees. It should be relatively short. One thing I don't know, we haven't seen the citizen interest.
It's in
Forms.
that packet. If you go to the.
It's in their
it's
packet,
in
yeah.
the select board
Traditionally,
packet.
we send it to the
Yeah.
committee, and we haven't yet. So I want to make sure, I'll make sure to send it to us separately,
Yeah.
just so we don't, yeah. The other thing, was that the only thing? Oh, I did want to also acknowledge that I know there have been a lot of questions about ongoing negotiations with the Westford Educational Association. You know, there was a presence at town meeting. We've had discussions, and as of this afternoon, there's a statement from school committee, just a brief statement updating on that. That's something that will appear on the school committee webpage. It's also been given to the Lowell Sun and Westford Cable Access, so presumably it'll also appear perhaps in some form on those outlets as well. And I think we'll retroactively put it in tonight's packet, if that's okay with Nina and Kathy. Okay, that's all I had. Other school committee updates?
Policy subcommittee met last week. We have kind of finalised 2 policies that are going to come towards leadership for kind of review before we are setting on the path of the waves that's to come. We've identified kind of the ones that we want to really tackle before Gloria leaves us forever. Policy will not be. I know policy will not be the same, but no, we'll be in good standing. I think some of these have the ones we've been working on. There's been quite a lot of wordsmithing and quite a lot of discussion about because they're older policies, and we kind of had to move them into the new updated procedures and stuff. So it is coming, and we're going to probably start meeting a little bit more frequently over the next few weeks just to make sure Gloria's stamp as well on them before she deserts me in policy desert
getting
island.
last minute meetings in before I
I
step out.
noticed.
Yeah, she's working me before the end.
It is a good reminder in the never too early to start thinking about category of we will need probably some new people on policy in the fall and other subcommittees. So just committee members start thinking about what might be interesting in the fall, because I'm pretty sure Gloria will not be on policy with us. And so we'll need somebody doing that good work. Other committee updates.
I just want to really quickly thank the Westford Rec Department for offering childcare during town meeting. My youngest attended from about 9:30 till 2:30 and had a great time.
Yeah.
So slept great that night, was thoroughly entertained, came home with crafts that she made. They had like the little iron beads that you like the fuse together with the heat of the iron. Yeah, they had Legos down there. They took them outside. It was really well done, especially for sort of the first real official offering of it. And I know there was sort of a pre-registration deadline that maybe some people missed seeing notification for. And I also know that the ages 5 to 12 may have limited what families could take advantage of it, but I just want to express my appreciation for it and hope to see it continue. That's it.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, seeing no other committee updates, we'll go to student update with Varn.
Yep. So Megna isn't here because she's sick or she has a sore throat, but I have a couple of updates. So this Friday was the DECA fundraiser where comedic hypnotist Frank Santos came. It was about an hour and a half long. It was a very fun event, and it happens every year. So if you missed it this year, it'll happen again next year. Spring sports have also begun after tryouts last week, and I believe they'll go on till I think the end of May, depending on if this team makes the state championship or not. And then MCAS is tomorrow and Wednesday for sophomores. It's ELA MCAS, and it's a reminder for parents to make sure that the kids have their charged Chromebooks before they get to school tomorrow. And if if the kids are unable to make it to school, make sure that they call as soon as possible tomorrow morning to let the school know that they're not going to be there. And then for seniors, capstone orientation is on April 6th, so that's coming up soon. Exciting times. And then junior meetings are also able to be scheduled. There's a checklist of things that juniors need to do before they schedule those meetings, and those are all available on the guidance website. And then also the job shadow agreement was due on Friday, and that occurs on May 16th, and it's an opportunity for juniors to spend a day exploring a field of their interest, getting to know different professionals and really not delving too deep into it, just getting their feet wet about something they might be interested in doing in the future. And then also something that the Student Advisory Committee has been working on is looking at lunch menus. So lunch menus and the ingredients that are on every single lunch item are now available in Mr. Antonelli's weekly emails, and there are QR codes around the cafeteria to look at what is in each of the menus. So yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for your work on that. Thank you for a really dense update with a lot of important information, especially like the good reminders on MCAS. That's really good. I had a question. I had a really silly question. Frank Santos, this is Frank Santos Jr., right? This is like his son. Do we know? Because I saw Frank Santos in college, and I'm like, there's no way it's the same Frank Santos.
Is this really like school committee?
Yeah, does anybody know? Okay, nobody knows. It's really bothering me. It was a long time ago I saw Frank Santos perform. Okay. Thank you, Martin. And with that important note, we're going to move on to business. Our first item is school committee nursing department update, which means, can I ask you guys, I'm so sorry to slide to a chair. I'm sorry. And we invite our nursing leadership to the table. And while we're doing that, let me welcome Joan. I'm going to look for the presentation. Put up on the screen. It's here. Okay. It's up. It's too small, but it's up.
Thank you.
What's that?
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. I will just give you the school nurses report for the end of the school year 2022 to 2023. Hard to believe. And I will not use the word COVID, which is good. The next slide. So basically, the framework for the 21st century school nursing practice, our standard of practice incorporates the community public health aspect, care coordination, leadership, quality improvement, and all these with the family and school community enables students to have a safe and healthy, ready-to-learn attitude and atmosphere as they go through the Westford Public Schools. The requirements to be a school nurse is a valid license to practice as a registered nurse in Massachusetts, a bachelor or master's degree, a minimum of 2 years of employment as a registered nurse, CPR and first aid certified, completion of an orientation program given by the state, passing score on the communication and literacy test, DESE licensure for the school nurses, and then after that you must either get a national certification or obtain a master's degree in community health, health education, nursing, or public health. Just a few numbers in the next couple of slides. The total number of students this year was 4,720. The total number of staff was 798. And the total number of clinic visits, and that is up to March 23rd, has been 16,423 visits. So we still have 3 months left of visits. We've given 2 EpiPens, and we've had 13 calls to 911, and that does include students and staff. This year, we were fortunate enough to incorporate the SNAP program, which is a professional software for nurses, and it's made for nurses and by nurses. It's a web-based software, and it manages student and student health records, medical records only. We used the SNAP program along with the Power School program to find out different schedules, and it worked really well together. Also, the SNAP, it enables us to work directly with the Massachusetts Immunization Information System, which is the MIIS, which is compliance and non-compliance regarding the required immunizations. So we were able to sync our records to the MIIS and find out who was not compliant in the needed immunizations at certain grade levels, which really saved us a lot of time. And we were also able to get health reports, visit summary, nurses' logs, medication administration, treatments, and other student information from each student. So it's really worked out well, and we appreciate it. Some of the health concerns, the allergies and EpiPens, and what I've done is I gave you last year's number, and then I gave you this year's number, so you can just scroll down and see that.
Thank you for that.
Which one is which?
Oh, I'm sorry, the left one is last year's, and the right one is this year's. I'm sorry about that. And these are just some of the basic health concerns that we deal with, but on the next page, I wanted to point out the ADHD and the ADD. So that's went from 215 last year up to 240 this year. And the depression and behavioral health issues went from 211 to 244. So we do have increased medically fragile students. We have a higher acuity. We have a lot of increase in students with medication, especially in the lower grades. So we're really trying to help the students with that and deal with them in their everyday, activities. There's a lot of dysregulation in the classroom, so our nurses are trying to work with the counselors and the students to make sure the student mostly is safe in the classroom, and everybody else is safe too.
Just, do you mind if I ask just on this note?
Yeah.
In terms of these kind of behavioral, issues and the ADHD, as nurses, because obviously you're very clearly medically trained, do you feel you have enough support, training, professional development in kind of these other I suppose, non-medical, and forgive me if I'm being very
No,
ignorant in the
a
question.
lot of our practice does deal with medical.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, mental health issues,
As well.
and especially in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Most of our professional development has been around mental health and mental health issues. So, yeah, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question since we're staying, hanging out on the slide? So that's a 15% increase on ADHD this year from last year, and you said that there's an increased acuity. How do you measure acuity?
Just by the visits in the nurse's office.
So increase of visits. So
And the number of times that they're there, the number of times. Some days the nurses are just putting out fires all day. Do you know what I mean? Just to get through the day. So it's just an increase of time with the students, an increase of the acuity, and the different issues that the nurses are dealing with the students.
Okay, so okay. All right, thank you.
And since we're on this, since Catherine brought it up, Jim, can you tell me, how do we decide what the nurses do for continuing ed?
So, well, we have professional development offered by you, but in the summertime, there's also an institute
Okay.
that, so it's through BU Shield, so it's a nursing, it's through BU, and they offer different professional development all the time. And there's certain courses that we have to take, professional development, and we still have to have the 165 PDPs that the teachers have to do. So there's a variety that we've never had. We also work with Leahy Clinic, and there's a other one that they have every once a month for 3 hours every Wednesday of that month. They offer different categories of the courses that we can take.
Okay, and so would it vary from building nurse to building nurse as to what courses they're taking, or is it uniform amongst
If it's
you guys?
offered in the schools, we all usually take the same thing.
Okay.
But in the summertime and anywhere else, they can get their own professional development as to what they need extra teaching in.
Cool, okay, thanks.
Thank you. And these other two slides are just the different health concerns that we've dealt with the different students in the district. And so it is, and many of the medically complex students have multiple diagnoses, so we're not only necessarily dealing with one diagnosis, we're dealing with more than one. I won't read them all for you. Again, we're back to health screenings this year. We've had vision, we did almost 2,800 screenings, hearing 2,000, BMI about 1,400, and the oral health, we did 302 students, which is a big increase in the amount of students that we've done before. This year, the nurses noticed there was a big increase in the number of students that had screenings or treatment to their teeth. So that was really huge. I'm really thankful to the health department that we could offer that again to the students, because it really does help a lot of students. Again, we conducted the SBIRT screenings. It's a state-mandated screening that promotes prevention and identifies early risk substance use in adolescents. It does provide us a one-on-one opportunity with the 8th and 10th graders, the nurses, or at the middle school, the counselors help out, to just talk to them. And we usually talk to them about the up-to-date, the tobacco, vaping, and whatever the other drugs of choice out there are, and just ask them about them. And I then send those results into the state.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that second marker on your slide? It says if a problem's identified, appropriate action is taken as soon as possible. What does that mean?
So what, if at the high school we had we would meet with the social worker or another counselor there, and we would get together and then call the parent, and if additional resources were needed, we have those available.
So if a student discloses something in a screening, then you call the parents?
We'd meet with the other counselor there, and then we would call the parents, yes.
Interesting.
And those screenings are done, how are they performed? You said it's in person.
Yeah, it's one-to-one, yep.
So you're going through every student in those grades.
Yep. Yep. Any more questions? So
Thank you.
Oh, sure, anytime. So at Westford Academy, we screened 340 students, 20 were unavailable, and 10 students opted out. We do give them that option. They don't have to answer these questions if they don't want to, and that's from the state. In Blanchard, this week, we are doing the SBIRT screenings there, and at Stony Brook, they screened 170, and nobody opted out, and there were no referrals made. And we will continue to collaborate with the administration, the guidance counselors, teachers, support staff, parents, Pediatrics West, and other nurse leaders. And with the community, fortunately, we're really lucky to have such a great relationship with the Westford Health Department. the Department of Public Health, DESE, and the Upper Merrimack Valley Medical Reserve Corps. And we will continue to collaborate with the counselors, the deans, and administration. We'll continue to update our policies and procedures as needed, and we, as always, working on stress reduction for not only the students, but for the staff, too. We see a lot of staff that are very anxious. You know, we'll give them time to just relax for a few minutes or whatever, and then whatever they need, then they'll go back to class. And we'll continue to assist the students and the staff with emotional needs, and we'll continue to promote optimal health for the students and staff. Our Westford Public School nursing staff is wonderful. I do have to say I apologize profusely, but Amy Johnson is an LPN at Miller School, and she's invaluable. She's in the REACH program, and I thought her name was on there, but I'm really not good about the whole slide thing. But I can't say enough about her. She's been wonderful in the REACH program, and she works closely with those teachers there, so they're really lucky to have her. Any other questions that I can help you with?
Actually, I have just one.
Yeah.
So, obviously, your team is really highly credentialed, and they have tons of experience, and it's really heartening to see like how much education and training they have. Are you concerned that if students know that their parents are going to be contacted after the screening, that they are being completely transparent about the aspect?
Well, we just tell them we're going to ask them the questions. What we would do is then decide whether they need to be contacted or not. So it's sort of a confidential one-on-one that we'd figure out with that student.
Yes, yes. I've worked with folks who really champion this piece of legislation, so that's why I'm asking follow-up questions, because it's really interesting to hear from you, like, how it's going.
Yep.
So thank you for answering my questions.
Sure, and you can always give us a call, or the middle school nurses a call. We'd be glad to help you.
Thank you very much.
As it moves forward.
Other questions or comments?
Can I follow up on something? And it's
Sure.
not necessarily shown. As I was looking at the numbers of the celiac lactose intolerant numbers, that's actually quite a large jump. So what I'm curious of is this something within the schools that we're actually looking at? I know, Varun, you mentioned that you've done a big job in terms of the cafeteria and listing, but do we actually have enough choices for lactose intolerant and celiac students in all grade levels? I don't know, is that something we've ever looked at or discussed?
So if we get a doctor's note from the doctor, then they have to supply a gluten-free meal.
They have to?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
And
but
I haven't heard of
specific.
any school
There's
that's had
been-
an issue with that. Usually,
Yeah.
or the parent would work with the cafeteria.
Yeah, so it's kind of on an
Yeah, we have-
individual?
Yep.
Okay.
I actually think the cardiac numbers are like more startling than that. They've like more than doubled.
Which one? Oh, cardiac
Cardiac.
conditions?
On the
Yeah, I
prior
actually had a
slide.
question over that. So that, Joan,
Hold on.
these are only students, right?
Yeah.
All right, it says number of students.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's 16 to
double,
29
yeah.
in
Yeah, that
a
was
year.
alarming.
Yeah.
Cardiac
sure.
concern.
It's almost,
So, and this is also
Yeah, it's
reported
almost
from the
double.
parents, so
yeah.
sometimes, they might not hesitate, they might not report it, and then the next year they might report it. So this is just what we get, so we hand out green cards and whatever they list on the back, that's how I get on.
Kind of wondering if that's related to the behavioral health concerns increase that we've seen, because I was just kind of wondering if that went hand in hand because of the physical manifestations of stress that people
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
experience. So
definitely could
that's the
be.
only reason why I was like looking at that.
And the time that it takes to diagnose certain things for people, right? Like, it actually could be more connected to even the year before when something started happening, that then they start exploring, and then when you ask for the information, they don't necessarily have details, and then eventually they do have more specific details.
Right, they'll have the diagnosis.
Yeah, but we
eventually.
shouldn't see that kind of spike. Like most of the other numbers kind of stayed the same.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Did you have something?
It very benign, I think. I feel like I remember seeing like a headline or something that a screening changed for this year.
Vision.
Thank you. Can
So
you just
we
explain that?
did change our vision screening, so in the K-3, K-2, they do a stereopsis now, so they, and you don't need to know, but anyway, it's
Appreciate
added.
the high level.
It's another screening that's done for the younger students.
An addition.
Yes, yep.
And how has that been going?
Great, it's a little more time consuming,
Okay.
but they've definitely caught more.
Okay.
Students.
That's great.
I was about to say, actually, that would be kind of an interesting number maybe for next year to, I know you've shown on the health screenings how many were conducted. It would just be interesting to
Oh,
have
how many
that-
referrals were
How
made?
many referrals kind of
Sure.
came out of it or was caught, just to know that, you know,
Yeah.
we're using really good screening programs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah,
we're keeping track.
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great,
I
thank
know.
you.
I had one quick one. You referenced the green information cards that we fill
Yeah.
out. And you mentioned the new information system that you have. Is there a way, have you guys looked at possibly allowing parents to enter that information electronically? I got to imagine, I'm picturing you, I don't know if you have to transcribe all of those cards into the system, but that sounds horrible if you do.
We do.
Oh my gosh.
So
No, like
much like
this.
we've done with like Power School, I wonder if there's a way
I'm sure there is.
to not require you to do that and us to have to fill it out every year.
Well, I understand where you're coming from 100%. Yes, I will look into that.
Yeah.
Because eventually this SNAP system should be paperless.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
So that's coming,
We're working,
sounds
right
like.
now,
We're
we're just getting our feelers on
Sure.
on the road and go from there.
Nice.
But no, that's definitely something we'll think about.
Oh, one
well,
more.
you just thought, when you said that it embedded with the mass immunization information, does that take off one of the requirements for parents to send in anything yet, or do you still want?
No, we still have, because sometimes it's not in there.
Okay.
So we're still, so say if an immunization goes in at the pediatrician's office.
Yeah.
We still check to make sure it's in SNAP. It always is.
Okay.
But just when we're getting the system up and coming. But
Okay.
eventually, we should be able to just take the physical and put it into SNAP.
Cool.
But we're working on that.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
That's one of our goals.
Yeah, thank you.
Joan, thank you so much
All right.
for being here tonight and
Thank
for
you very
everything.
much. Thank you. I
You
thank
and the
you
other
all.
nurses.
Really, thank you.
Nobody was curious as to how many COVID cases we had this year.
No, she said she wasn't gonna
We
say
weren't
that.
going to talk about COVID. Wow,
No more
that is
COVID.
remarkable, huh?
I know, it's so funny.
You jinx it.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Okay, we're going to go to our next agenda item, which is an update from School Guidance Department, and we have our Head of Guidance, Lauren Clark, here with us. Good, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I didn't drink coffee at 5 p.m., so I don't have to stand up this year. I can sit down and relax a little bit.
All right, let me pull up your presentation.
Thanks. Okay, I just wanted to go over 4 different things tonight. So we'll review mental health supports, trends in college admissions, different programs and initiatives we kind of developed this year and ran with, and then what's ahead for next year. One more for me. Thanks. So I just wanted to reintroduce the committee to my school counseling department. I have 8 school counselors and 2 school adjustment counselors at the high school. Mental health supports. So we were able to implement 2 clinicians this year through pediatric behavioral health. They come in and deliver school-based counseling, and they run one small group. We have 1 counselor who comes in on Tuesdays and 1 who's virtual on Mondays. It's been a really successful program. We have 8 students who are currently seeing the 2 clinicians. We have 11 students who already saw the clinicians this past year and then were dismissed from the program. We have 16 students who referrals were made, but they're currently not working with PBH because of insurance, or they actually found a different therapist. And then we have 6 students on the wait list. So it's been a really nice tiered intervention for our students to provide some sort of counseling throughout the day. Unfortunately, it's ending this June, and that's because the 1 clinician that comes in, she's traveling about an hour and a half to get to us. So we're in a mad rush to kind of get a new mental health partnership with someone who can provide those direct services to our students. So we're kind of in the process of looking for somebody. In the fall, the school adjustment counselor and I actually reached out to a bunch of different agencies and just even private therapists to see who can kind of collaborate with us and come into WA, but unfortunately, it's just the wait lists are ridiculous at this point. They're really lengthy, so it's hard to get someone to come in. But I have an idea in mind for the partnership, so we're trying to work on something there. We actually had a school counseling intern who was amazing. She worked with us last spring and then into this first semester throughout January. She was actually recognized for the MASCA, which is the Massachusetts School Counseling Intern of the Year, which was awesome. It was really cool. So we met her on a Zoom meeting and told her and said congratulations to her that way. But she was nominated by my team for that recognition, and then she actually won that award, which is really nice. She was our go-to to really implement a lot of additional supports for our students this fall. And so the reason why we took on an intern, we were able to do it because she actually started last spring. And so that kind of eased the transition into the fall, because the fall's so busy for us that we wouldn't be able to train somebody at that point. But she ran with a lot of new initiatives. She was our go-to to provide additional support when the counselors were in their senior meetings. So she was a real asset to our group. And then we continued this year to work with the consultant from Brookline Center for Mental Health, and we really improved our bridge services this year.
In what way?
I'm going to tell you in a couple more slides.
Okay.
I have a whole slide on bridge. Students receiving risk assessments. So this year we have 6 students who are on our list for risk assessments. This is lower than last year, but we did a little bit of a deeper dive with my team last Friday to kind of figure out why there's a difference in that number. And so last year we have 19 total risk assessments, but we actually had 13 students. So there were some students that were sent out multiple times there. And then in previous years, all these numbers here are a little bit higher because it's those multiple students there. So 6 is on par a little bit for this year. So we had a little bit of our repeated students. We also think that the number could be lower because we have the clinician now at WA, the 2 clinicians, implementation of the support service, the student support service, and Bruce Rich and his program. And so we think that students, some of them that we sent out last year, are actually paired up with somebody, a clinician on the outside.
Can you talk about briefly what might qualify somebody for that assessment and what the process is?
Sure. So if a student needs a higher level of care, and so the counselors are referring out to a therapist at that point, or VinFen or Leahy Behavioral Health, and so we send students out if they have ideations of suicidal ideations.
Does it include something like a school refusal, or like, I'm just curious, is that another reason that, okay. Oh,
No.
okay.
No. Hospitalizations, we have 19 hospitalizations for this year, and that's on par with previous years, unfortunately. There is a lack of access, so we had a couple students this year who sat in ERs for 5 days and they didn't get a bed. So that number could potentially be higher, but students are just leaving the ER at that point.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. So we did end up starting the GAD-7 PHQ-9 screening in 2019-20. That's our screening for anxiety and depression. 7 questions for the GAD-7, 9 questions for the PHQ-9. We give it to all students during advisory at different times in advisory. So March would be juniors, and then February we did a different group of students. This year what changed is that we actually had curriculum around the screening. So in previous years we gave the screening to the students and they were asked to complete that during homeroom. And this year we put on about a 20-minute presentation, showed a couple of videos on anxiety and depression. I had 2 school adjustment counselors and 1 school counselor lead that initiative for this year. And I think the curriculum was important to deliver to the students so they really kind of understood why they were taking this and why we wanted the data and how we can get students access after that. Okay, bridge update. So we had 9 students who were officially enrolled in our bridge program from September into March this year. We have 3 students who are currently pending reentry meetings. Last year, throughout the full year, we had 9 students in the program. So a few different changes for this year. We're actually staffed each block for bridge, which is wonderful. So we really had a piecemeal sort of system where Tracy Murphy is amazing, but she was running all around to different programs and leading a few different programs there. So she's staffed in that room a couple blocks. We have teachers that are staffed in that program. Jess Elliott is staffed in that program as well. So we have coverage every single block. We actually moved the office this year, so there's a space for the bridge room. Before we had it in the counseling conference room, we had it in the alt-ed room, we had it in the principal's conference room, wherever we could find space for students. And this year we actually built and kind of moved ourselves into a different office, which is right outside of 123. 123 is the student support service room, so they have an extra clinician in there if we need extra assistance. So that was a nice move on our part that we were able to kind of snag that room. We actually upped our use for our portal use this year, so that's where we can collect data and track students and kind of figure out how many students have entered and exited the program, the reason or diagnoses why students may be in the program, the grade levels of the students. So we really had an uptick there where we started using the portal, and in previous years we just didn't use that portal. They actually put on a really nice professional development opportunity for Tracy Murphy last week at Bentley, and she said it was wonderful. So there's a couple tools there that she's going to start implementing in the coming years.
Could I ask, just while we're still on the bridge?
Sure.
I'm curious as to if you could speak about typically how long, on average, would a student maybe be in the bridge program?
Sure.
And is there kind of a cutoff point for those students where what happens if they're not able to kind of re-enter? Or I don't know if that's the correct terminology.
Yeah. So it's a short-term program. It's 8 to 12 weeks is what they is the prescribed amount of time. Our students actually stayed a little bit shorter than that, and I would say the 1 to 4 weeks, and that's because of the diagnoses behind it. So we had some of our students enroll in that program because of a concussion, and so that was a little bit shorter duration on their end. We have one student enrolled in that program that plus the 12 weeks, and there's a lot of other things that we're kind of doing to help that student.
So that was my question, actually. So the bridge program is for reentry after hospitalization, so it can be physical or mental health. What is the breakdown of whether or not kids are in the bridge space because of a physical manifestation of an illness versus a mental health manifestation?
Yeah, so there's 3 different categories, and so WA has 2 different categories that we operate on, and the first category is mental health hospitalizations. Every counselor who has a student reentering through the bridge program and offer that service, there's a referral form that goes to the 2 folks who lead the program and myself, and we sign off on that program. Any student who was mental health hospitalization, that goes right into the bridge program. The second category is for students who've missed the medical 10 plus days for a concussion, and they need that space for other purposes. So they need a dim of lights, they can't have a lot of people in there. Third category, which we just don't have the bandwidth for, is for medical. So if a student is out for 10 plus consecutive days for medical reasons, not the concussion, not the mental health, then we can consider that, but we just don't have the bandwidth for that.
So none of the kids are physical health. So it's either concussion or mental health. So
yeah, so I can give you the breakdown for it too.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so it's anxiety this year. It's anxiety disorder, mood disorder, physical health, which is the concussion, depression, and eating disorder. And so the majority of the students were 10th graders this year. So we have 5 10th graders, 2 11th, and 2 seniors.
And do you see by the end of the year, at least all of them that have come through this year will have re-entered? As you kind of said, sometimes they can go over the 12 weeks. So I'm just kind of curious at that point, where do the conversations, and how long, would you ever have a student almost doing an entire school year in that program, or at that point, is there another conversation had?
There's more than one conversation after that. So the 12 week is really the threshold. There shouldn't be students enrolled in that program. It's a short-term intervention to make sure there's a smooth transition for my students coming back from hospitalizations. That's the purpose of the program. So if you're past that point of the 8 to 12 weeks, if there's something else that we need to get you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
It's an interesting program to understand.
All right, college admissions trends. So we continue to see colleges going test optional. We're about 80%, if not more at this point, who are test optional. I got a lot of numbers for college admissions to kind of throw at you now. So our average number of schools that WA seniors applied to was 9 this year. Last year was 8. Okay, that's not bad. 9's pretty good. I have my students who applied to like 22 and then 2, and I'm like, oh, either way. So 9 I'll take. Top schools for this year where students applied, so the schools with the most applications from WA, UMass A, UConn, UMassL, Northeastern, and UNH. The only school that is different is UNH. That kind of jumped up a couple spots this year, and then URI was off of our top 5 list this year. All right, 346 seniors applied early. That's 82% of kids. So talk about a busy fall. We're maxed out in the fall, and this is why. So we have 82% of our seniors applying early, which means November 1, November 5, November 15th deadlines. I didn't put any early decision 2 or early action 2 deadlines, because that's not early to me. So that's all November deadlines. That's the 82%. We had 77% last year, so that's an uptick for us. At that point, we had almost 2,000 applications to 208 schools be sent out. As of last week, we had 389 seniors apply to 381 colleges. That's 4,000 applications. So every single time a student applies to a school, the counselors push out the application materials. So my transcript, my letters of recommendation, a couple school profile, a couple extra things. We're pushing out 4,000 applications from the school counseling department. We had 365 seniors who've been accepted to at least one college, so that's 87% as of last week, which is wonderful. Okay, so before November 15th, counselors are hosting 50-plus senior meetings, which are about an hour, if not more, each for their first initial meeting. Typically, parents don't request, or caregivers don't request a second meeting, but some might do that. So that's an hour per meeting, and letters of recommendation, I would say an hour to hour and 15 minutes per letter of recommendation. There's no time in the fall to write letters of recommendation in your office. You just don't have the time to do that because you are hosting senior meetings and you have a caseload of other students. So majority of them are written at home. So since there are more applications, not just at WA, but across the states, there's been a drop in admit rates. So for example, BU had 80,000 applications this year. They have 3,000 seats, 3,100 seats. Okay. So because there's so many more applications, they're going to have a lower admit rate. All right, new things we did this year. So over the summer, I proposed a new professional development calendar for my school counselors, and everyone has an ASCA membership for this year, which is the American School Counseling Association. And during our PD days, we are enrolled in a specialist course, an ASCA U course. So there's a list of about 15 courses that counselors can choose from, and they enroll in them at the start of the school year, and then they have the professional development throughout the school year to complete that course. It's about 50 plus hours to complete that course, and it could be from anything. Mine this year, I took a leadership one. I took one in special education, which is great for our recertification, and then there were a few other ones that folks took within my department. So college admissions, mental health is one, trauma, that's another one as well. Power School implementation. I'm like, Power School implementation. So last spring, we rolled out a beautiful master schedule for Power School. It went really well. We had a lot of students who we met their first choice request, so that was great. For this year, we rolled out Power School with grades, attendance, and now we're currently in the midst of scheduling for the 23-24 school year. 8th grade visits to WA. We tried something different. Mr. Antonelli had a wonderful idea, and we brought all the 8th graders to WA this year for our transition activity, which was really nice. So typically, Jim and I would head down with the whole VPA department, and really any other department who wanted to come with us to talk about WA. A lot of it was about scheduling, and then the wonderful performances by VPA. And we would break up. One day would be Blanchard, and one day would be Stony. And this year we invited all of them to come up to WA, and Jim and I didn't talk that much, and it was great because the kids didn't want to listen to us. They want to hear performances, and they want to hear from the DECA folks. They want peer counselors to lead them on tours. We had 400 students touring WA. It was a really nice event this year, so I'm happy the way it rolled out. We collaborated a lot with the 2 8th grade counselors, and they really ran the event for us to bring the kids right up to WA. So that was a nice positive event we had this year. So we are in collaboration with Nicole LaViolette, our new our town wellness coordinator. So she's going to be coming to a school counseling meeting. I think it's next Friday, and she'll be kind of talking about the town services and resources that we have available as school counselors. We changed our online platform from VHS, so we're not using virtual high school anymore. We rolled out EduSeer last year. Students have greater access to EduSeer. There's summer school courses. The courses, you don't pay by seat like VHS. The courses you can stop and pick up mid-year if you wanted to. They're self-paced, so there are a lot of benefits with EduSeer, so we went with that platform. I already spoke about adding curriculum to the GAD 7-page Q9 this year. And then we're going to roll out a new parent series in the fall. So we have a sophomore parent or caregiver presentation this spring that we're rolling out in my department, which will be virtual. And that's going to really kind of start spearheading our programming for the fall. And so we're thinking, whether it's month or every 2 months, some sort of programming for parents and caregivers. We're doing a lot. Go ahead. Thanks. Okay, what's ahead? So new personality assessment through SCORE. So we no longer have youth science through SCORE, which was just our personality assessment. We're rolling out something different for next year. We are piloting a concurrent enrollment course through Middlesex. And this is a really cool opportunity for students. So our business department is taking on this course. They're offering this course called Money Matters. It's concurrent enrollment, which basically means a student is a WA student and a Middlesex student. They take the course at WA with Sarah Ricard, who was wonderful in teaching that course. It's really mirroring our personal finance course that we offer. So this gives more opportunity for our students. So now they don't need the transportation to get to Middlesex, and they're not, they can take it right during the school day with us. So they have probably 85 kids who signed up for that course. Yeah, so we'll have to, I think it was probably 60 kids first choice and then 25, I think-ish, for the second choice. So that's a really wonderful opportunity for our students, something new that we haven't done before. So we're going to pilot it.
Semester-long course?
Yep, so we're rolling it out next fall. So the syllabus has to be presented. Sarah Ricard writes her syllabus. It gets presented to Middlesex, and they kind of review it. The business department will review it and give feedback back. It's a really nice opportunity. Okay, I'm working hard to add a new direct service for our students. I really think that we need a partnership with a different program, so I have some ideas there, but I'm working on it. And then that parent and caregiver series starting in the fall.
I have a lot of questions.
Wow.
Yay! Woo! Okay.
In summary, not much going on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so that's my question. So actually, to be honest, because you have 12 informational slides and like 25% of them are about college, which is a very specific time and it's a very specific amount of guidance counselors who are working.
Yeah.
So in your
Still.
screening tool on the GAD-7 page Q9,
Yeah.
so how many kids did you screen? What were the results? Like, what's the deal? Because you're just talking about that you rolled it out, but I don't really see like any
data.
comparison from this year to last year. Like, I think we're in the middle of an epidemic of mental health crisis, so
Sure.
I want to know more.
Yeah, so I can give some data points for you. So I've never delivered on the data points on how many students completed in previous years. This year we had a lower percentage completed, and I think that might have been just like we were going to give a curriculum around it, and then you go back to your homeroom and complete it right then and there, sort of thing. So it's a little bit lower, the stats for that this year, but I can get that information.
And what prompts it to be? So it's given to all grades during advisory.
Mm-hmm.
And so then do kids opt out of it? I mean, I think it's like
It's informed consent. So by them, and they know that based on that presentation. So the presentation just shows them what anxiety is, what depression is, and then it shows them what we use the data for, what happens after they take that screener, how long it takes. So that type of information goes out during that curriculum. And the students know that's their choice to take it or not take it.
And so, like, what happens next? And so I think that's like a big black hole of information that I
Yeah.
think was really important in the current time that we find ourselves.
So the students, after they take the screening, a couple things can happen. So if they take the screening and they score at an escalator elevated level, right? And so there's a breakdown of how the score goes. And this is a screener. WA didn't come up with a screener. This is like a universal screening tool.
I know what these are, yeah.
And so there's a universal screening tool that breaks down the numbers for us. So if you score 22 to 24, whatever it might be, you're in an elevated area. And so if you meet a certain criteria or threshold, then the next steps, we kind of move on from there.
And and I just want to know, like, how many kids met that threshold, what were the referrals, what happened next. So I think that's the data that I want. I want to know how well this is working and, like, what are we doing to follow up with these kids. I don't know. Do other people have questions?
I'm actually interested in, I don't know, we've got the panorama data as well. I'm just curious, does the panorama data ever kind of come into your department and, for analysis, and kind of is it comparable maybe in some of the other programs you're using for kind of getting that information?
Yeah, so we have to remember Panorama, it's not a mental health screening tool, right?
Yeah.
So it looks at the 5 competencies for SEL.
Yeah.
And basically that's student reporting. And so we pull that data from the fall, and then they just took it recently. And then I'll share the list with my team of students who are in that escalated area, and then they meet with those students. But it's not a screener, right? So we need, in my department, more of direct services for students and interventions to help students. So that's what I need, more tiered interventions.
I suppose I was kind of thinking more along the lines of, I think one of our, I'm even blanking on some of the questions from the panorama data, but if I remember correctly, some of them is, do you feel like supported here? Do you feel you've a trusted adult? They're more generic questions, but I'm just curious, do the stats that we kind of, or the information we get from that kind of represent, you know, it would be nice, I suppose, to see that that kind of data maybe is being kind of analysed and then compared to what your department has experienced. Oh, are we seeing this kind of percentage of our students? Because I'm going to assume a student who's saying they don't feel like they belong or they don't feel they have a trusted adult is then on your screener going to definitely potentially test for those elevated levels. So,
Yeah, I think, you know, the purpose of Panorama when it came out, from what I understand, is that it came out during COVID, right? So,
Yeah.
so that sense of belonging, that was our way to pull a list of students and say,
Yeah.
counselors need to meet with these students to make
Yeah.
sure everyone is all set.
Yeah.
Now, you know, if I can be looped in on what the goal of Panorama is and what the tiered interventions are in between it. So you give a screener in the fall, you provide an intervention, you give the screener in March. I'm all on board. But until that's presented to me, I don't run Panorama.
Okay.
That's a Brian Rourke question.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I guess like some of my other questions is like we spend a lot of time today talking about college admissions and stuff, and obviously that's really important.
Yeah.
I think, but it's unclear to me like what we're doing in the years riding up to that. So what are the 9th grade guidance counselors doing, 10th grade, 11th grade? And if we're talking about changing the culture of our schools towards looking less at that, then our presentation is largely based on that. Then it's like that's part of what we're trying to change, right? And thinking about a lot of different ways to measure success and a lot of ways to support kids as they're really struggling to come back. We've seen a lot of data today about how kids are struggling with higher levels of mental health needs. So I'm trying to figure out like how we're using the resources of the counseling department. I'm not even sure like what their credentials are, and I want to get a sense of like, I completely agree with you that we need to bring more outside resources into the district, that those resources are really tapped in the community, that we're seeing unprecedented levels of waiting in the emergency department.
Right.
That's what I do in my day job, but I'm trying to get a sense of like what resources we have right now, how they're being used, and how we can better utilize them.
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the credentials of a school counselor is that you have to have a master's degree in school counseling. The mental health resources is the ones that I provided. We have the 2 clinicians that came in, that continue to come in. We have 2 school adjustment counselors. They don't have capacity to see gen ed students, so I don't have that. And I wish I did.
Special education students only.
Yeah, and some of them are not on plans, but a majority of them are. And so what we're trying to do is try to find a way to face it or get ahead of it, of the mental health crisis. And so no one's going to give me money to fund an extra school adjustment, right? But there's a really wonderful program called Cartwheel. And so what they do is they provide about 1.2 school adjustment counselors who work hand in hand with a school. And they partner only with Massachusetts schools. And what they do is they provide clinical work, and they're open from 8 to 8. So it's not a 7 to 2 capacity where my clinicians can only see 8 students because of the rotating schedule. And so there's a lot of other options out there for students, and there's always, if we can get the funding for it, I should say that. Counselors juggle mental health on a daily basis, students coming down with questions about how to get a work permit, college admissions questions, how do I get a job, let's set goals together. So it changes every single day, and I think that's the draw of the job for all of us that are in it. I don't think I have 3 slides in college admissions because I was like, what else? I had 1, and then I was like, I need to add more about college admissions because this consumes our life, right? And so the thing is when we're in the middle of the fall with our 1-hour senior meetings, are we bringing in freshmen to do one-on-one meetings? Absolutely. You bet we are. We paired up with the PE department this year and the health department. They bring all of their kids down to do our meetings with freshmen so that we can make sure they transition nicely to WA. Are we able to implement stuff with the English department so that we push into classes to deliver curriculum? Absolutely. So there's different ways that we go about it. It's just that I was slated 15 minutes, and I feel like we do a lot, and I don't have a lot of time
All
to
the
talk about
guidance
it.
counselors have seniors?
All the school counselors have a mixed caseload, yep.
So what percentage of that do they have of seniors?
They have about 55 to 60 seniors.
What's that? What percentage is that of their caseload?
It's all split, so it's only alpha. They probably have, it's 230 kids in their caseload, and that's split across.
So 25% of them are seniors.
Yeah, there's no like grade 9 counselor or grade 10 counselor. Yeah.
You will
questions
stay
around
with the same counselor for 4 years.
Correct, yeah.
Right. I just didn't know how they were splitting up the.
Yeah, it's just alpha.
other questions around the table?
I'm curious where that amazing intern is going next, and
Oh.
do we ever get her back?
I wish
by
I
the sounds
could.
of it?
Keep
I think
keep
that's-
tabs on
Yeah.
that one, right?
That's why we, we were afloat in the fall, because when everyone moves their deadlines for college admissions, and I know that takes and consumes a lot of our time. So when that all shifts to the fall, it's where are those supports for the students who come down running to your office that need some help. You're pausing your senior meeting to walk out to get them, or you're coming to have a counselor on call, which is important to mention. So in any day, we have a counselor on call for half the day, the AM or the PM. So if there is a student in crisis that comes down to our office, someone is available to speak with them. So we split that up, and they've been doing that for years at WA. So that's really important too.
I think that was a really innovative use of an intern. You still have to have the resources to supervise that person.
Yeah.
So while that was really great that you did that, I also understand that comes
Yeah.
at a cost of supervising that individual.
Yeah, we'd love to have her back though. She's
Right.
wonderful.
Right.
I have one other question.
Can I go to Sean, just because I want to give,
yeah.
want to like spread the table?
Thanks. Yeah, briefly, Lauren, are we doing anything to kind of educate students on student debt, things like that, while they're making decisions on college?
We have financial aid workshops, so MIFA comes in and hosts a presentation for us. And I do think that the Money Matters course is one of the reasons they chose that course, for our juniors and seniors. But we have the financial aid presentation that we host in the fall for our parents and students.
It's kind of an afterthought, though, right? Because it's like your guys' whole job is to help the student get into the colleges that they're looking at, and it comes in after the fact.
Well, I mean, we talk about the college planning earlier on than that. So in February, we meet with our junior parents and we start planting that seed then. And the financial aid part isn't hush hush. It should be spoken about and discussed within a family. So we always we talk about that as well, and that kind of starts our junior year.
Oh, good.
But anyone can come to the financial aid. It's not just for senior parents. You want to start out earlier. You want to start out in 9th grade, if not before that. And so if there's any resources that come across our desk that we don't necessarily host, but that we know about, it always gets shot out in our newsletter. It goes in Mr. Antonelli's his Friday email. We blast it through SCORE. We post it in Google Classroom. I mean, we can't get more communication out there. We have about 1,200 hits on our newsletter each month, which is really wonderful. So there's a lot of good communication.
Anytime you say newsletter and the student is nodding, sorry, but
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's like,
where
that's
it's
like a
fine.
success story in and of itself, whatever the hit rate is.
No, I love
you-
the newsletter. I go to the guidance council. I looked at it yesterday, and they have a list of scholarships. So I'm gonna go through those, look at the ones
Yeah,
that are good,
that's
apply to
awesome.
all of those. So it's very helpful for me personally. Yeah.
Thanks.
Here.
You can't get a better
I know,
endorsement
right?
than that.
It's a plant.
Um,
Oh, sorry, I was gonna go
Yeah,
to you if you had
I
something.
did
I
have
didn't know
one.
that you didn't.
I did have one. I know that Power School was new this year.
Yeah.
We did get some feedback from students that there were difficulties with Power Schools and calculating GPAs, and I just want to check in about where that's at. We all understand that new systems have their glitches, but do you have what you need, resources going forward? Are those problems hopefully smoothed out for the future? What's the status of that?
Thanks for checking in. So there were some bumps in the road with Power School. I feel better about it. So the master schedule itself, we weren't nervous about that part, and that really rolled out nicely. Grading and attendance have been a little bit more of an issue. I think they've ironed out at this point. Folks have been very patient with Power School, parents and caregivers and staff, and so I very much appreciate that. We have a really amazing team of people working behind the scenes at it. So I have 2 administrative assistants, Linda Vernalia and Karen Brown, who are amazing. And so we'd be lost without them, because those are the ones who are doing grades, who are doing attendance, who are writing and drawing up the reports in Power School for me, the creative side of it too, while they have 45 kids pass by their desk saying that they're late or need to go to a college visit, while I'm at their desk asking for something, and teachers are there as well. So behind the scenes, they're really working their tails off to get those things up and running, so I really appreciate that. And Steph Goslin has been a godsend, and she fills in the gaps when we need them. So it's getting better, it's improving, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent.
One of the things I just wanted to come back on was actually what I think would be some interesting information maybe for even next year's, slides is first, all our students picking a college route, and for those who maybe are choosing not to pick a college route, how many are looking at military options, or I don't know, kind of training programs, or I think it would be, considering we talk a lot about, that there's so many other opportunities out there. Not every student
Sure.
is always necessarily focused on college. It would be some interesting information kind of to add to that. There was one other kind of question, and I don't know if it's necessarily for you or more to maybe Chris and Kerry. I'm kind of curious as to, you know, in general, who on a district level is really overseeing our entire, you know, counselling department, and not just at WA K through 12. And also then, my memory serves me correct, we've never had a K through 8th grade or K through 5th grade even presentation. So as long as I've been on it, in terms of we have adjustment counsellors and guidance counsellors in the other schools. And I really appreciate this information, but I would love to start seeing a bit more information on a K through 12 kind of program, or trying to understand more how each of our schools are you know, meeting up. Because I'll be honest, I firmly believe that what we do in K to 5 massively impacts our kids, our students in middle and high school, in creating that resiliency, and you know, maybe the conversations you guys could be having with even the K to 2 staff, you know, would be of value for them, knowing kind of the types of conversations and situations that arise, you know, in that level. So it's something that I would really appreciate, and I think as a committee we should be knowing. I mean, I know Marisol was saying, but I mean, I'm seeing it every day as well in the papers, that student mental health and well-being and the emotional difficulties, we've seen it in the numbers tonight that have come up, both in your guidance and in the nursing. We're hearing that, you know, they're increasing.
And I think we can think about how we would do that, how we would maybe pull in all the grades into a presentation in the future. I think that would be really helpful.
So to that point, I do think, I'm glad that you separated those two things, because as you were starting to ask that question, I was going to remind you that Lauren is the head of counseling at Westford Academy,
Yeah.
so she did a great job speaking about Westford Academy. Our counseling department exists within our pupil services, right? So in our Department of Pupil Services, so Courtney Moran is overseeing that. And I think you've even mentioned it at one time in a previous meeting. That's a concern, that we need more bandwidth within our Department of Pupil Services. Because I think we're asking too much of that one department with the actual support that exists there as it is right now. But the idea of looking at whether or not there was a similar type of presentation, K to, you know, or pre-K to 8, we could certainly look at that as well too. Yeah,
That'd be good.
I think it would be important, you know, I hear it reported from teachers and from the nursing staff. I believe I've mentioned it before, you know, there's other districts that have, like, you know, a psychology director, or, you know, I think it's something, and Valerie might remember, you know, we had a lot of that information from the MASC conference last November, that school districts really have to start thinking of themselves as kind of the first place, or, you know, for student mental health, because services are so slammed in the longest waiting list, that we really need to start maybe slightly shifting our mindset of what a school district actually looks like, because we're the kind of first line of defense really for, you know, for all students, for anyone who needs help. So I don't
Thank you.
know.
Yep, no, I think it's an important thing that we should prioritize looking at and having that discussion. And I want to thank you for your time and for the whole department. I know it's I joked, I said, is that it? But I mean, there's so much going on. And
that I couldn't talk about, but I need 30 minutes apparently next year.
Exactly. So I think you got it in concisely. And just, it's clear you know the ins and outs of what's going on at WA, and just if there's ways that this committee can support that work. I mean, there's not a lot we can do directly, but I mean, the things that come to mind are, you know, we do approve a budget and we do set policies. And so as you do your work, if you think of things that, you know, are important for us to know in doing that, we have a policy subcommittee, but I mean, you would likely communicate that through, you know, through administration, but things that if you ever want to get something in front of us. I mean, our policy subcommittee has looked at graduation requirement policies over the year, right? That comes out of often out of staff saying, this is outdated, or we're seeing trends, same thing with budget priorities, things like
Thank
that.
you.
So
Thanks for
you're
saying
always
that.
welcome to let us know what's going on.
Oh, I will.
We appreciate
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
Same with our nursing staff, by the way. It goes for you as well. And I will also say that we have one more agenda item. Is that right? One more. You folks are welcome to stay and listen in. It will be interesting, but also we understand given that it's getting late, if you need to leave as well. And thank you for being here. And now I re-invite our friends from SMMA back up to the comfortable chairs.
Right. So, if you remember when we first started talking about the feasibility study, and there was the initial timeline that existed for gathering data, one of the things that I had thought in terms of that timeline was that we would be collecting this data and we would be missing the opportunity. Is everybody with us? We'd be missing the opportunity to enter into an MSBA pipeline, right? So one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute, Phil and Rosemary are going to be able to talk about the idea that the process of going through the MSBA process. And they were able to collect significant data when they did all the school visits, and they actually have information early enough for us to consider entering into the process and applying and having a statement of interest before the April 14th deadline of this year. So one of the things that they're going to talk about is sort of what their findings were, and then what that would look like if, as a school committee, you want to move forward to presenting and creating a statement of interest for this timeline. Because one of the things Phil will talk about is just how long that timeline can be.
And just for context too, I would say I feel like this study, the master plan that you've been helping us with, it really is. It's this assessment of our buildings, about the structures, and then there's the other piece, which is, okay, looking in the future, what our educational needs will be. How do those two things come together? But this is really that first piece. This is an assessment of our buildings and what you see as priorities and possibly concerns that we would want to get on this timeline. And just for people who may be watching, the MSBA program is a statewide program that helps districts build, renovate school facilities, repair, and they partner with you. And there's a criteria, and there's a pretty rigorous process for getting your project through into the pipeline and through all the gates. But in the end, you end up getting a large part of the funding covered by the MSBA, and so it's a huge advantage to us if we go into this. And it's once a year that we can submit for this first part, which is the statement of interest, which would be due on the 14th. And so that's why, for people who may be wondering, this isn't the full report of what we've been looking at with the master plan, but really is saying if we were to prioritize meeting that April 14th deadline, here are the things that we would want to consider, because we would need to vote on that by our next meeting.
And two more quick tidbits to just give more context to the MSBA that I've learned through the work group was MSBA does not help funding with administrative spaces.
Right.
So while that may have been sort of an origin of this process, the MSBA just wouldn't help fund that. And that the MSBA process can be very long. Like some districts can be in the pipeline for 5 years. So when we think about the trade-offs of sort of making this deadline in April, it to me feels like, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it just makes sense maybe to get that ball rolling if we can.
And if anything we just said doesn't square with what you would want to say, please.
You're the experts, but I think those help set the table of what the context are saying.
And you guys will help us through the MSBA process
Yes,
too?
that's the other advantage.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
At least this initial part. At least this initial part.
Yeah.
So for the record, I'm Phil Poinelli. I'm principal of SMMA and serving as educational planner. Here with me is Rosemary Park, who's doing project management and assisting me with educational planning. So, and a lot of people behind us. Just very briefly, the agenda, we're going to talk about facilities assessment specific to a school. Then we're going to talk about the MSBA process and schedule, and then next steps. So if we go to the next slide, you've seen this before, and when we came here at the end of January, we talked about this process, and we used the day school as an example, one of your schools, and used day. So we looked at, architects and engineers looked at the building envelope and structural system, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing system, the site, and so on. And next, we then looked at what we refer to as educational effectiveness, and that is the ability for the schools to accommodate curriculum delivery today as opposed to when they were originally constructed. And we know education's constantly changing, and your newest schools are over 20 years old. And a lot has happened in that period of time, let alone going back another 20 or 30 years before that. And so as part of that, we're also looking at how they can function into the future. And so it's not just present day curriculum delivery, but we're always asking, to a teacher, how might you want to teach in the future? How might your successor want to teach? And then can the buildings have the kind of flexibility to accommodate those kinds of changes that we can't even foresee? And so, some of this is crystal ball, but a lot of it is based on, information that has been studied academically, like how lighting affects learning and how ventilation affects learning, having proper furniture, and so on. So these are all the parts and pieces that we've been looking at. So what we've identified is that there are 3 schools, the Abbott, the Robinson, and the Day, that are in need of what we refer to as comprehensive renovations, or more than that. And there's no schedule assigned to this, and I don't think that this is a surprise to anyone. These are the older schools. They were built generations ago, and multiple generations ago in some cases, and so, but we through the process, we've identified that the Robinson School is the school of yours that has the most challenges to it as we look to the future. So, and again, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. So we looked at the exterior envelope, the interior materials, the sort of architecture in some cases is from the physical assessment part is the best parts of the school. But there are a lot of issues there associated with finishes and materials within the buildings. There are issues of handicapped accessibility throughout the school, and so there are more issues when we'll get to the educational assessment. On plumbing side, most all of the plumbing is original. It's all beyond its life expectancy. It's functioning. But as we go through and develop our capital response budget for you, you're going to start seeing lots of lists of things for those 3 schools, unlike your newer schools like Miller or Crisafulli.
Can I ask a question based on the age of the building? Has there been lead abatement in this building? Like, do we have any concerns? Is that something that you guys have looked at?
Pretty sure we've done that in the past, and we've addressed every school that would have had anything. We've done whatever remediation. The windows were redone at Day and at Robinson a number of years ago.
And you're on a regular AHERA review that's every so many years on that issue. Staying with back. So there's no fire protection system in the school. Not required to have, as it's grandfathered, but there is none. That puts more responsibility on the fire alarm system, which then needs upgrading. Heating and ventilating system, again, much of it is original to 1969 when it was built, and again, beyond its useful life, anticipated life. And the electrical, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing, they're all in need of replacement, and they can continue to function, and they're going to need to continue to function, and they can continue to be repaired. But looking forward, they don't have a lot of robust capacity to be able to serve you well into the future.
Now, some of those things are true of all three of those buildings.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, if I were giving this presentation for the other two, it would look very similar. But what we're doing is we're leading up to a process that we'll get to in a minute with the MSBA, and you really have to put your the foot forward that's going to get you furthest along and the most quickly through the process. But so next we move into the educational adequacy, and as you're aware, we're exploring alternate grade configuration, but it's the one school in your district that is an open plan design. There's no walls between the learning environments. There's no acoustical separation between the learning environments. There are 4 learning environments within each of the pods. Many of the classrooms are smaller than MSBA guidelines. Again, the STEM now is being taught at the elementary level within the classrooms, which MSBA looks to the schools to have appropriate storage, appropriate water supply and deep sinks to be able to serve that type of education within the classroom itself. These are all areas where Robinson is lacking. The need to improve acoustics within the learning environments, and the need from the health from the learning standpoint of improving heating and ventilating systems. And then again, none of your schools are air conditioned, and so I think as you move forward, air conditioning is something that you would certainly want to consider, not only for this school but for other schools as well. So this is a little bit hard to read, but this is the current plan of the Robinson School, and what you're seeing is right in the middle. You're seeing 4 classrooms and 4 sets of 4 classrooms, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. You realize that those are 4 large open rooms, completely open to each other. So the lines that are drawn are really imaginary lines on the floor. There's no, they use furniture and bookcases and so on to put up some degree of visual isolation, but there's no acoustic isolation that takes place between the rooms themselves. And over the year, at some point, there were these large acoustic baffles that were hung from the ceiling because the original design was wholly inadequate in terms of controlling sound within those spaces. But those are not a good long-term
What's a
solution.
baffle?
It's they're
It's like a duvet.
big, I don't even know what their material
It's
is.
like a soundproof
Fabric.
thing.
It's
It's
just
like, it looks like a
about
duvet.
Dangling
almost, or-
sheets
yeah.
of fabric that absorb and
Thank you for
channel
clarifying.
sound.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, but I don't have a
Just
picture.
explain it right there. That was very helpful.
Next slide. And this is what we refer to as a comparison slide, where we're comparing the net teaching spaces to the MSBA guidelines. We often refer to them as the red plans. Everything in red is greater than 20% smaller than the MSBA guidelines. Next. So this is the MSBA statement of interest in their own words. This is literally copied from their website. And for the MSBA is Massachusetts School Building Authority. As Mr. Sanders was mentioning, that they're in the business of helping communities to fund schools through grant programs. So I'm not going to read this, but the grant programs are capital grants, which is what we're talking about here for an SOI, and then they have accelerated repair grants, which I believe Blanchard is taking advantage of now with a new roof. The capital repair projects has been put on pause. That no longer exists, at least for the time being, because they're trying to push more money into the process, into the capital core program. Next. And so again, we'll get copies of this to you, so you can read at your leisure. But but I wanted to make sure you had MSBA in their own words. If we go to the next slide, it makes it a little bit easier to do. The SOI submission process opened in January. It closes in April, on April 14th. So there's paperwork that needs to be done. There's approvals that need to be made and signatures to apply to the paperwork. So again, what we have identified is that we believe there's enough information available to you to make this application rather than wait another year. And you'll see that in a minute. The SOI program then over the next year reviews the submissions and then identifies who's going to get what's called a senior study, where the MSBA sends individuals to the school to walk the school and see if they believe that's going to qualify, and then recommend you moving forward into an eligibility period. And there's again a whole series of steps that takes place once that starts. So the senior studies typically don't come out until November, December timeframe. The recommendations for initiation into the eligibility period typically take place in the late winter, early spring. So we're talking about nearly a year from now to even know about whether or not you're accepted into the program. They typically receive anywhere between 100 and 120 applicants a year. They typically approve, it varies, 15 to 20 to 25 a year. So it's very competitive. If you don't get it the first year, you have to you submit the whole thing again. So if we move to the next slide.
And that's your point to the putting your worst foot forward.
Exactly.
Is to show, they want to see, you know, what is this need that you've identified, and we're just sharing with them our concern and problem.
That's
not-
right.
Not a solution.
They don't,
Just
yeah.
to say, we have concerns about this.
So we don't, so what, thank you for raising that, because I've been a little bit kind of confused. So what we're looking at right now is just essentially saying these are 3 schools of, I'm assuming we're talking about 3? Or we're
No,
talking about
we can-
rather
that's
than-
our, that's our
We have to
point. You
pick
can
one.
only
Oh,
put, you
you
can
can
only
only pick
submit
one.
one. That's why you pick the one that you have the greatest concerns, but one of the things Phil said, and/or that you understand that they will see as also the greatest concerns. Because we might actually have equal concerns about 2 buildings.
Yeah.
But one of our thoughts is that we know that we have one building in the district that is an open concept.
Yeah.
That is a different experience. Whether people love it or people hate it, it is a different experience than our other students are having in other buildings. And the MSBA is going to look at that and look and see, wait a second, you do have an outlier need here. One of the things Phil will talk about is it doesn't mean that you can't then talk with them about additional things. It's just that all we're doing right now is trying to get their attention to say, hey, we think that Westford has a concern here.
Yeah.
We're interested in letting you go to that next step, which, again, I keep,
And the SOI will make reference to Abbott and Day. Without saying they're part of this application, but will contextualize the concerns over those. It's possible that the MSBA will say, we're prepared to receive you into the grant program, but we want you to look at. And they might say, they might want you, your schools are 300 to 350 students each. In the greater context of elementary schools, those are very small schools. MSBA is often approving 600, 700, 800 student schools. So they may say, we are prepared to invite you in, but we want you to look at, we want you to study your other populations within the district for possible combining as part of this study. So there are a lot of variables that they can come back with, but the idea here is that if you don't get your foot in the door, you just keep slipping. And I will say that they have a pretty good history of moving open plan schools along, because they recognize that open plan schools are a relic from educational theory from the late 60s and early 70s, and so they've replaced a number of open plan schools. Again, we're not, the SOI will not say we're looking to replace anything. What the SOI is saying is, we, Westford, have a problem, we believe, and we would like to partner with you to study that problem in detail. And so what that then does is the study that we're conducting is looking at the whole district.
Right.
That study will look at just what they ask you to look at, but in greater detail, and with more options of possibilities. And again, they require a minimum of 3 options. They require a no-build option, a renovation option, and a new build option. So it's not until well into the study process that you're making a selection
right.
from the architect's 5 or 6 or 7 options that have been put in front of you.
And I don't
So-
think that can be underscored enough, that
Yeah.
this April 14th deadline does not mean that we have a solution and a plan.
Right.
It is just simply to get on the radar of the MSBA.
We have a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's, once so we're going through, if you were to do this, if you were to elect to do this, you'd be submitting the SOI, you'd hear about that, say, the first of next year. You'd go into an eligibility period that lasts 9 months. When you form a building committee, you get town meeting approval, you fund the next study, and so they allow you up to 9 months to do that. It's just, I'm sorry.
So that wouldn't even start until.
That's right.
That doesn't even start
20
until
2024.
9 months from now.
Right.
And then you go through these various modules of picking an owner's project manager, picking a designer, design and feasibility study doesn't even start until module 3, then goes into other phases of design. In purple there, in module 7, is eventually construction and closeout. And so the quickest that, plus the current 9 months that we're in, waiting to get to there, that adds up to a range between 5.5 to 7 years.
I just read that, which is why I was laughing, because I was trying to do the math, and I was like, there's a footnote, though. I was like, well, my math is correct, because.
That's a long time.
Oh, man.
Thank you
So-
for putting that there.
So that is the process. So I think that we have. So this is what we are doing, and we've shifted our efforts to assisting you with the SOI. This is pushing the process a little bit further, by not very much, but a little bit further into the end of the school year. And the next slide is just what goes from here. The draft, in anticipation of a draft of an SOI, is underway. As I mentioned earlier, it requires approvals from this committee, the select board, including meeting minutes to be
Actually,
submitted.
I think it doesn't need the meeting minutes. I think that's what it said. I think it says it doesn't need the meeting minutes anymore. It needs just the date of the vote and then their signatures.
Okay.
But I
All
think the meeting minutes is something that they used to do, and they've changed that.
That's-
Because
they're-
is adding the select board, I think, is a new change.
It used to be the town administrator.
Yeah, okay.
And, yeah, and it's a constant
Yeah,
bouncing ball of
right.
keeping up with them. And so, this is the last slide. Open it up for discussion, but this is what we see as a way to move you forward more quickly than I think you had anticipated, based on information that we have.
I have 3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay, my first question is, what's your experience with moving other school districts through this process?
Very good.
Well, I mean, how
I-
many schools have you moved through? I should have been more specific. How many schools have you moved through this process approximately?
Oh.
20, 50, 200?
20, 25.
Okay.
I will say the MSBA identifies that the SOI is supposed to be completed solely by the school district.
Right.
Without professional advice. Contractually, we're part of your process. And we had a district that tried to do it on their own. 5 times they got turned down. They hired us to rewrite it, and it's in design right now. So,
Okay.
so quite a few.
Okay. So then my next question is, in terms of this, one of the things that I think is a strength for our application is that they're looking at the building solely. So they're not comparing district to district. They're comparing need to need. And so one of my questions about the Robinson is, do you think the number of students impacted impacts the application. So would the MSBA be like looking for like more bang for their buck? Like if there's another building that's like has 800 kids in it, but we only have 250, is that going to be a problem?
I think I don't think it's a problem, but I do think they may very well ask you to study that, because a school for 250 versus a school for 700 is going to have the same size gym, the same size cafeteria, the same size library, and which are typically bigger than what you have today. But the building one of those is less expensive than building two of them. So they may very well encourage you to look at more.
To put more like if what our remediation process would include a study that there would be maximizing that remediation for more students, right?
It could, yes.
Thank you.
And, again, part of the application is going to include a discussion of alternate grade configurations being studied. And so Robinson, as a larger school in an alternate grade configuration, could make a lot of sense, for example.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee?
How bad is bad in your experience? I'm just curious.
What's that?
I'm just curious as to, based on other schools you've put through the thing, comparing, Robinson and Day, are we on a par? Are we worse off, or?
So we,
Depends, I know it's all.
when did we, winter of 20, just before the pandemic, we just finished the Dedham schools, and they have 3 elementary schools, and all 3 are in very rough shape. And we said, let's pick the 116-year-old building. And we helped them craft the SOI around the 116-year-old building rather than the 1946 building. But where is that going to go? Again, those schools were 250, 275, 300 students, and so that project's in design. We didn't apply for the project. So where is the feasibility study going? I should look into this, but I can't imagine that the MSBA didn't say, we want you to study some of your other older schools as part of this process. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, so you're saying that the solution may resolve the issues of there being 3 schools that are a problem.
It could. You don't know. You don't know what they're going to ask you to do. But, and again, this is not a commitment in any way to anything happening other than getting in line for concert tickets.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. Just a statement of interest.
Gloria?
So I guess I have a comment and a question. And I guess the first is, I think it is important to clarify for the community, for anyone who hears about this, for any parents who have children in these buildings, none of these buildings are unsafe.
Right.
Correct.
None of these buildings
Correct.
are unhealthy or unsafe.
Correct.
We're doing long-term planning for the future, for the long-term lifespan of our district. So, the students who are there now, the students who will be entering those buildings, we're talking about a 5.5 to 7 year process. So there are students who haven't been born yet who will likely attend these schools. And
they're loved.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of history. There's a lot of positive feelings about all of these schools. We're embarking on a long-term process. All of these buildings are fine right now, and I just think it's important to contextualize that.
Yes, yes, that's true.
And I guess my next question is, what are our next steps as a committee? What is the recommendation, and I don't know whether I should be looking this way or this way, but, what are our next steps? What should we do we need to be thinking about before our next meeting, since we are on this tight time frame? What do we need to be doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks?
Well, but to that point, though, you will need to vote to authorize me to create and enter an SOI focusing on the Robinson School for the April 14th. And because, again, the SOI, you don't need to read the draft and approve the draft and wordsmith the draft, as we like to do as a committee, right? It's just more about the idea of the SOI, as Phil was talking about. I mean, it is a very specific process and a plan. We need to decide if we're going to enter into that. You authorize me to do that, and we need to identify one building in order to do that. And so then that same vote needs to take place at the select board. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would be on the 10th for us, and on the 11th for the select board, because that's their meeting that week.
So we don't necessarily need to vote on the completed SOI to go forward. We just need to vote on.
Right.
Or
the
do
process
they?
to
You're
do
making
the
a, you're making
authorization.
I think we should check on that.
Okay.
I think that,
whether they're actually voting on the SOI?
yeah.
Okay.
We'll check on that.
I thought the terminology, because the terminology is that you're authorizing me to do something.
But am I signing it?
You're signing, they just make this big deal about the superintendent is literally the only person who can go into the portal and do things with it. So that's where I feel like the collective vote on something is different, but we'll check.
So there are parts within the SOI that are, what are some of the issues
Right.
that make this building, in their terms, obsolete? And so we will take language from the study that we're writing and cut and paste those into a Word document
Right.
for you. The discussion of, and we can collaborate on the discussion of alternate grade configurations. We can collaborate on the discussion of
The fact that this
other
need.
schools.
Yeah, the fact that this need is coming out of a feasibility study about a master plan is very good. Because as opposed to us just being on our own, thinking, we're getting a lot of complaints about this building, let's go ahead and enter this process. That I think is beneficial to us, so we want to make sure that we talk about the fact that we've been doing this initial investigation and this research, and this is what came out of it.
Now, you mentioned that we'll need to choose a school, but we need to know after tonight what that is, right, in order for the SOI to be drafted.
Correct.
So I think we should, I think we defer to your professional judgment on what's the best candidate, and, with the understanding that the other schools may get in some way or the other, it may touch them at some point, through the process, but that, you're presenting Robinson as our best candidate.
recommendation to you would be that we believe the Robinson is the best candidate for the process.
And not that, and just to not lose sight of the fact that we will have this extensive capital list of needs
Right.
in our other 9 buildings, right? So,
And,
okay.
and there may be buildings, there may be capital issues in Robinson that need to be addressed prior to this 6 or 7 year period. So there, it doesn't suggest that, we just leave it alone. Your house needs repainting every so often. Well, all of the schools will need these capital investments, but at least you're making decisions on those capital investments in the context of a master plan.
I feel like we've talked about this, but I just want to ask sort of point blank, what is the risk of not doing the deadline, right? Like, is there like an application fee that we'd be losing out on? Is there, it sounds like it's to oversimplify it, it's like a no-lose sort of situation to try to get in the deadline.
It's a window.
Okay.
So if you don't make the 14th, then you have, you can do it, say, I don't know what the date will be next year, but say it's April 14th, 2024. So, so there's no, there's no downside to, I mean, you know, it's all timing.
Okay.
You just add another year to the process.
You just add another year to the process, but there's no application fee, there's, the SOI next year won't look any different than the SOI this year.
Okay. And from a sort of holistic view, right, if we think about that wonderful chart that I'm going to study later, with the color-coded modules showing the timeline, it sounds like maybe the only risk would be starting this before the community is sort of ready, right? Like if we got to a point where we're welcomed into the orange module or something and we're ready, the MSBA gives us a window for funding or to
So,
Am I
right,
think-
so,
am I thinking that through
so they're
correctly?
not going to respond to you until the end of the year.
right.
At which point they'll, if they choose, they'll send someone out. If they take it, if they accept you, they give you 270 days
Okay.
to take the next step.
Okay.
So that's 9 months plus the 9 months we're
And,
waiting for them to respond to you.
and at that point, we've completed our feasibility study,
Yes.
so we ourselves are more informed
Yeah.
and ready for that process to start then.
Right. I'm just trying to think of it
Yeah.
from like, I mean, like we are well versed in the work
Yeah.
that has been happening, but the wider community is still waiting for the report and is still waiting to see some of that. So I'm just thinking ahead to someone who wants to be a little slower about the process and what someone else might imagine the trade-off being to wait or to make this deadline, right?
We don't make any decisions on this, though. Like, it's literally just
Right.
an application to say,
Yeah.
we have schools of concern in the district, come talk to us. It's not us tonight or submitting on the 14th of April to say, we're definitely reconfiguring the schools, we're
Right. It's no
we're
commitment.
renovating. There is
It's no
absolutely
commitment on
no
our part.
commitment in any way. It's actually just
Information gathering.
information gathering.
That's all it is. It's information
To refer
gathering.
back to our college discussion, it's early action versus early decision, right? We're not, early decision, you're tight end. It's early action saying, I want to go to your school, let me know. I'll have other plans.
You just had to go there.
And so there's a hot link in the presentation, whether it hot links in the PDF or not, I'm not sure, but you can cut and paste, obviously, into the browser. That is for information for districts. There are 5 or 6 or 7 different pages within, so it's information for superintendents, information for communities, information for parents. So there's a lot of opportunity for people who want to dive further into this to go to the massschoolbuildings.org and look at it further.
That's helpful.
And am I right in saying we've done this exact process for Blanchard Roof?
No.
No, not
No, so
Blanchard
that was
Roof.
one of the things
What
he'd
is it?
mentioned earlier when we talked about the accelerated program.
Okay.
We did go through a program with MSBA, but it is their accelerated program, which is different.
Okay.
It still has a process to it, but it's for smaller projects
I
that,
gotcha.
and have a more immediate need. This is their core program.
But it's still the MSBA.
It is still the
So
MSBA,
we
the
are-
same organization.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And
we're-
it's the
we're
same
fine.
organization that we had this conversation before. Was the MSBA in existence when they would have built the 3 other schools?
No.
It wasn't. It
No,
created after that.
MSBA was legislated in 2004.
Right.
Your schools were all
Yeah.
built and occupied by then. They came into existence in 2004, took 4 years to promulgate their rules and policies, and sort of opened for business in 2008.
Okay.
So only a school in design, starting in 2008, followed this process.
Last question for me is, can you give, I know the number for the Blanchard roof is like a 45% reimbursement. What's it look like for the core program?
So it would follow the same, the reimbursement rate follows the community, does not follow the project, right? So, and that's based on wealth or poverty of the community. The difference is that in a accelerated repair project, what they identify is closer to what you're going to get. In the core project, the reimbursement rate is that rate that's then adjusted for a whole series of factors.
Point system, right?
Yeah,
Basically.
they have, you said, let's say 40%, whatever the number was. In a core project, it's 40% of eligible costs,
Right.
right? So, and, you know, that.
Yeah, they decide.
Off their list, yeah.
When, so they, for example, they limit site reimbursement to not more than 8% of building cost. It's never enough, unless you're on a 2 or 3 acre site and you don't have site work to do. So there's going to be some number of dollars that are not going to be eligible. The amount for furnishings and equipment are numbers that they've established that are not enough, to our experience, to properly equip a school. And so though that additional cost would not be eligible. So there's a series of things. So it's some number below what they identify as your town number.
Does the reimbursement take into consideration potential inflation costs as the project moves on? I'm just curious in general, at what point do they commit to, okay, we will reimburse X percentage of this project, but 2-3 years, and especially what we saw in the last 2 or 3 of these recent years, inflation costs, especially in construction industry, went through the roof. And so at what point in the process typically does that kind of percentage, because I'm very aware that
there are a number of communities that are experiencing that right now,
Yeah.
right? So there are projects that are already underway and
Yeah.
costs have gone up,
Yeah.
and now, and they didn't get more money from the MSBA.
Okay.
Right.
And that in itself, but then, and that can be problematic, but.
Okay.
But also, the MSBA sets a dollar value for construction cost.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is now.
I don't remember what it is
500
now,
or
but
something.
they just raised the rates.
But
So they caught up.
Yeah.
They've caught up.
For now, for a minute.
well, they raised the rate.
Okay, fine.
They haven't caught up because,
Yeah.
let's say they've raised it to 500, but we're seeing construction costs coming in at 700.
Yeah.
Sure.
So.
I remember the cost.
But
they just did it in
but
November.
they're not in sync. It's very generous
Right.
compared to, it's to my experience, it's probably the most generous state-run reimbursement program in the country. I may be wrong, but if I am, it's not by very much. New Hampshire has no reimbursement, for example, at the state level. or just about no. And there are a lot of states like that. So, and it's a grant program. And, you know, people will, but that's what I want. And they say, well, you can take the grant or not.
Right.
It's your choice, kind of
We
thing.
won't
But-
pay for that.
But, you know, this is what we'll pay for, and it's a grant. It's like a scholarship. You want the scholarship or not?
Thank you very much. This has been really, really informative.
Just have a quick question, kind of more on the the long-term scale. So, say you submit the plan for Robinson now. Is the plan to submit one for Day and Abbott in the following years, or like how does it work for the other schools?
That's up to you, but that's also up to
It depends on what they
comes
say.
out of this process. This process may be, we don't know what the MSBA is going to, if they invite you in, what
Right.
they're going to invite you in to do.
Mhm.
So it may include more than just the Robinson, and
Right.
it may not. So I think we have to first
What they
see
might
what that
suggest as a
is.
solution.
Right.
What they might suggest as a solution might
Stay and
include the
Abbott.
other schools.
Yeah, so
Part.
say they don't include the other schools, right? My understanding is you have no risk for filling out this form, right? Say, like, what's the harm in filling it out for a day and saying, what if they include it in the next year plan, right? Like,
Because they will only entertain one project at a time.
oh, okay, so you have to
Be
wait the whole
competing
7
against
years.
That's a hard and
Okay,
fast rule.
gotcha.
Is that they will only accept one project at a time.
Oh.
So get as much as you can, first time up.
Cool, thank you.
Great question.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you. I feel like hopefully we all have a pretty good understanding now of what we're looking at, and that it really, I mean, we will vote on this at the next meeting. So just, again, to talk about the process, by the next meeting, we should have a pretty strong draft of the SOI that we can at least lay our eyes on, and then we as a committee can take a vote to authorize the superintendent to enter into the SOI, and then we will need to do the same the following night. So hopefully,
But there's a general understanding that it is Robinson.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
do we need to
SOI is
vote
going to-
tonight on it to be Robinson, or I don't know if you.
I
need
don't,
to
I mean,
that.
we don't necessarily have to vote, but I would
Okay.
look to see if that's, if the consensus is that we agree that that makes the most sense to
Okay.
kind of maximize our chances
Okay.
in the process, which is, I think, what we're hearing, and
Yeah, I mean,
I'd be inclined to not disagree with that.
Right, they're the
It
experts.
sounds like
Yeah.
that this is a head nod consensus of the
It is.
committee
It
type
is.
moment, not a vote moment.
Don't need
but-
to, okay.
But, you know, head nodding,
Yes.
yeah, there's, I mean, obviously the work has been done, all of the schools have been looked at
Yep.
in a very thorough manner, and our experts are recommending a path, which sounds very logical for very, very logical reasons about this school being an outlier. And that this school would be our best foot forward into this process to get that foot in the door. So I think there's a lot of head nodding going on.
And that fun reminder that if it feels unsatisfying, there will be all 9 schools' level of detail in the report coming.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so for 2 weeks from today, the 10th, we will vote on that SOI. Would you be available at least by Zoom, perhaps,
Yes.
if questions come up? So committee, if there are questions that occur to us in the next couple of weeks, or once we see the SOI, we'll have that opportunity to discuss that before we vote on the 10th. And then we would then take it to the select board on the 11th, and we'll talk to them about that. I mean, that won't be a joint, there doesn't need to be a joint meeting with us and them. They will independently be looking at it. Again, I would ask if possible, if you would be available. Again, that could be a Zoom situation, because I could anticipate that they would have questions that we would love to defer to you, but if not, we'll do our best as well.
Ted?
Yes.
You mentioned Slackboard, like, do we need to actually, for example, like Dr. Chu, will you start a conversation with Slackboard instead of
In
like
advance, yeah.
April 20th,
Yes.
12th, say, hey, do it?
Thank you, yes.
Yes,
We will,
absolutely.
in fact, be doing that. Yeah.
And I don't know this off the top of my head, but if the smaller group of us is meeting again, and anyone else has questions
Right.
that we can funnel in.
Because we still have that we've been meeting as a working group.
Right. So if you think of something tomorrow or the next day or whatever, that we can funnel in before the 10th to process and get answered, send that to me and Chris or Dr. Chu. So,
So yes, we can be available on the
Appreciate
11th.
that. Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see
Thanks
you
for having
soon.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for waiting for us, too.
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.